ambulance. Is the patient breathing?
Yeah.
Okay, tell me exactly what happened.
These lads came in the house and started stabbing my dad.
So Encrochat was an encrypted platform of messages that criminals were using to organise their activity. The NCA led a nationwide investigation with the help of police forces and regional organised crime units, and in particular ourselves here at the North West Regional Organised Crime Unit, we received intelligence from the NCA in relation to OCGs operating in the North West and using the encrypted platform. That's when we then launched Operation Subzero.
In May 2020, I was tasked with looking at Operation Subzero, which was the Coggins crime group. The Encrochat system used a series of handles, or nicknames almost, that could be attributed to each person so you could remain anonymous. As part of that, we started looking at Vincent Coggins, who's Moonlit Boat, Paul Woodford, who's King Wasp, Michael Earle, who used the handle Blade Hedge, and Robert Jarvis, who used the handle Soft Herb. They were all responsible for the supply of Class A drugs, and beneath them they had a network of couriers and storesmen and warehouse people who would store the drugs on their behalf. Paul Fitzsimmons, using the handle Northney, was clearly a banker and also facilitator of drugs. Darren Tierney was a trusted courier using the handle Scalp Staff. He was responsible for moving drugs around the UK in a vehicle that was fitted with a hide. He would move drugs up to Scotland. Dean Burrows was using the handle Olive Scooter. Dean Burrows knew where the stash houses were and was responsible for not only collecting and dropping drugs off at that stash house, but then moving them on to other drug users further down the command chain. Kevin Rimmer was a user of Sappy Stag. He was effectively a storesman on behalf of the crime group, storing heroin in large quantities to kilo amounts. And then Paul Glynn, who didn't have an Encrochat handle, he was the storesman for the Class A of cocaine. He lived at Croxdale Road West. On Saturday the 23rd of May 2020, a team of Manchester criminals travelled from Manchester to Croxdale Road West in Merseyside using a white van. When they got to that address, which was the home address of Paul Glynn, they attended the address with one of them dressed in a fluorescent jacket as a delivery driver. At that time, they then entered that address with machetes and seriously assaulted Paul Glynn. This was all done with an attempt to try and find the drugs that were clearly being stashed at that location by the crime group.
Okay, tell me exactly what happened.
These lads came in the house and just started stabbing my dad.
Stabbing your dad?
Yeah, and there's blood everywhere.
Okay, is the attacker still nearby?
No.
No. Do you know where they are?
No, they took off in a van.
Okay, I'm organising help for you now. Stay on the line and I'll tell you exactly what to do next.
Okay.
As a result of reviewing all the Encrochat material, it became apparent that Greater Manchester Police were reviewing material for the criminals in Manchester, and they identified that a Manchester crime group had been responsible for this robbery.
I'm Detective Chief Inspector Roger Smethurst, the Greater Manchester Police, currently attached to a serious and organised crime group. In 2020, the National Crime Agency notified various police forces that they were receiving data from encrypted mobile phones. We were allocated a pack of data which on review we established was linked to the Cox family, who were a Salford organised crime group well known to the police. As we reviewed it further, it became apparent that Jason Cox and Craig Cox had been involved in a robbery in the Merseyside area, whereby they'd stolen a real large quantity of Class A drugs, namely cocaine, from a home address, and in doing so had committed some nasty injuries to the people who lived at that address, and they then had sold that cocaine on to other criminals.
103 at scene. Hello? Where are you, mate? Right, so what injuries have you got, mate? Just sit yourself down.
There's ambulance here, mate. Is it just
You alright there, mate?
Yeah, it's just the arm, lad, yeah.
Right, so just need that. Is it still bleeding?
I'm not sure.
Right, let's have a quick look, mate. Mate, just concentrate on look at me, yeah? I'm going to ask you some questions. These lads are going to look after you now, yeah? Alright, so you just concentrate on me and what I'm saying. Alright, what's your full name?
Paul Glynn.
Paul Glynn. How are you spelling Glynn, Paul?
G-L-Y-N-N.
G-L-Y-N-N. Look, just keep looking at me, mate.
The crime group had identified Croxdale Road West as being a stash house for the crime group through the contact that they'd had with Dean Burrows, and it appeared that the use of a tracking device on Burrows' van had taken the crime group back to Croxdale Road and enabled them to identify where the drugs were being held.
Have you upset anyone lately, or has anybody got a bit of beef with you?
I don't know, it's serious, but you don't know how people are these days, do you?
Right. Well, any information's better than nothing. No?
I've figured it out myself.
We also established that there were two other nominals who'd been involved in the robbery, a Merseyside nominal called Richard Caswell and another lad called Ben Monks-Gorton who was from the Lancashire area. We know from reviewing the phone downloads that when the drugs were stolen, they were split between the group, so as that various members of the group all got a share of the proceeds of the robbery. We know that Jason Cox sold his drugs on to other criminals within the Manchester area, who in turn we were able to show had then sold them on again. So no drugs were ever recovered as a result of our investigation, but we did have the evidence to show that they had been sold and who they'd been sold on to.
From that point, it became very clear that the crime group were aware that the pie and mash stash, as they described it, had gone in, due to the fact there was police cars and a lot of police activity in and around that address. What we saw on the Encrochat material then was a scrambling of messages, and a rally call effectively went out to try and find out what had happened at the address. At that time they were unaware that they'd actually been robbed. The robbery consisted of 30 kilos of Class A cocaine, which is in the value of about £1 million worth of drugs that had been stolen. At this point, Vincent Coggins, under the handle Moonlit Boat, who for the period of the Encrochat messages had been pretty quiet with any sort of criminality, he then starts getting involved, effectively as any manager would do, I suppose, when things start going wrong, and he starts tasking people to find out what's happened, and he wants to know who's stolen his drugs. Early investigation that the crime group conducted with Paul Glynn and his son suggested that the offenders spoke with Mancunian accents. This was something that Coggins and the crime group weren't satisfied with. They didn't believe that Mancunians would come to Liverpool without firearms to steal from them. During that investigation that was made by the crime group and by Coggins and others, they incorrectly identified 3 males from the Liverpool area as being responsible. A male by the name of Brian Maxwell Jr. was the main suspect for that robbery, despite the fact that Brian Maxwell Jr. was completely innocent. It became apparent that they were intent on not only getting their drugs back, but bringing harm to those that had robbed them, and 2 other males were named as being responsible with Maxwell. The crime group had ready access to firearms and weaponry and were intent on causing serious harm to Maxwell and the 2 other named individuals. They also identified that they had stolen vehicles and they had other crime groups that were willing to do the work on their behalf. On the 29th of May 2020, a series of threats to life notice and disruption notices were issued by Merseyside Police. On that night, we worked closely with Merseyside to ensure that no harm was brought to those that had been identified.
When we have a threat to life, we have a duty as the police to protect the public, to protect individuals. It's very important that that individual who is subject to the threat is made aware of that risk. But also, if we know where that risk is coming from, we also have to put disruption in place to prevent that threat from occurring. And that's what we did within Operation Subzero.
We served disruption notices with Merseyside Police with armed officers to Paul Woodford.
Information that there's a possible potential for you to engage in criminal activity.
We served disruption notices to Michael Earle and also to Vincent Coggins. In the same respect, we served threats to life notices to Brian Maxwell Jr. and also his friends.
I like all your guns.
So we'll leave you to it now, go and sort the kids out, make sure they're alright, okay?
I'll make sure it's alright.
Cheers. Alright, see you again.
Oh, hey, you know, you've got better guns than me.
There was clearly concern amongst the crime group then, but amongst Vincent Coggins and Michael Earle, that someone was talking to the police as they believed, when in fact we were reading the Encrochat messages. A male by the name of Brian Maxwell Sr., who was the father of Brian Maxwell Jr., became aware of this threat. As a result, Brian Maxwell did what probably most fathers would want to try and do, and tried to resolve the situation himself. He did this by offering to repay and buy back the debt of the £1 million worth of drugs. Maxwell paid Coggins back a sum of about £300,000 in cash. For the remainder of the debt, it was suggested that Maxwell Sr. could sign over his house to Coggins. This was done in the form of a charge being put on the property, which was done officially with the land registry, and it meant that Maxwell Sr. had to pay 1% of his property back for the duration of the £600,000 that was still owed, on a base of 1% per month, working out about £6,000 a month to be paid back to Mr. Coggins. Despite that signature being made by Brian Maxwell Sr., the Encrochat conversations revealed that Mr. Coggins still intended to bring those people that he wrongly perceived had been involved to harm at some point in the future, and effectively speaks about waiting to pounce later on in the future when things have calmed down with the police.
So on the 13th of June 2020, everything changed. Encrochat had to send messages out to all users that their server had been compromised and they could not protect the safety of the messages, for all users to power down their devices and to dispose of them.
That now kicked us in quickly into the arrest phase. On the 16th of June 2020, we made a series of arrests, being one of the first forces and regions to make arrests in relation to Operation Venetic.
Merseyside Police with a warrant!
Yeah, mate, take a seat on there and I'll go through it all with you, okay?
Yeah, go with my colleague upstairs. What's your name, mate?
Vincent Coggins.
Vincent.
I say for me on defence if you do not mention my questions and it's later in court.
They were all charged with offences of supplying Class A drugs and also blackmail, and they were all charged and put before the court and remanded. After the 16th of June 2020, when all the main 4 defendants had been arrested, we then had further strike days to arrest the wider crime group and to ensure that all that had been involved in the drug dealing that we'd been witnesses and evidence were arrested. It was clear for the period that of the 8 weeks that we were reviewing the Encrochat material that they had access to large amounts of drugs, many hundreds of kilos, and they were responsible for moving in excess of several £1 million during this period.
Operation Subzero was extremely complex, and it's taken many years to bring to fruition. It's had many challenges along the way, but we've now brought this to a closure with the great result that we've seen at court. And this is what we do at the North West Regional Organised Crime Unit. We won't stop. We will tackle and we will disrupt organised crime groups out there, whoever they are and whatever activity that they are undertaking.
The word is, we are looking to get you, we are targeting these people, and we will not allow you to commit these offences.